Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for being patient. My name is Matt Lechter, and this lecture is College Education, Certain Debt and Uncertain Income, on behalf of the Henry George School of Social Science. When you hear about student loan debt in the media, you'll often see infographics like this, or these kind of bizarre predictions that at some point there will be, whatever was it, by 2030, this one says, there will be $16.7 trillion of student loan debt. That's preposterous. The first one is, what are the arguments for higher education? And the principal one you will hear is what's called the human capital theory. The human capital theory states that education gives people more skills and knowledge that makes them more productive, better workers, which in practice means that they earn more. The more people you educate, the more you educate them, the more money they end up earning, the more productive they are, and everyone is better off. Human capital theory also includes all of the numerous alleged non-monetary benefits to higher education, and many of these things are unmeasurable, like personal enlightenment and personal growth. Those particular arguments don't appear so often anymore, but some of them, the non-monetary benefits are measurable. Things like college graduates are more likely to vote, they're more likely to be homeowners, they're less likely to commit crimes, or rely on social services or default on debts. And if it's a good social outcome, education usually corresponds to it. And to give you a lay of the land, at this point the human capital theory just dominates the discussion of higher education today. The proportion of 25-year-olds and above by educational attainment way back in 1940 until a couple of years ago. Back before World War II, only about 5% of Americans had a bachelor's degree or more. The vast majority hadn't even finished high school. And you come out to today, and actually the Census Bureau released a newer version of this chart. It was unreadable, but it's actually more than, I think it's like 32% of people have a bachelor's degree or more, or 25 and above, and almost no one has less than a high school degree. And as for those earning studies, take a look. This is the average earnings, the average earnings of full-time year-round workers as a proportion of the average earnings of a high school graduate between 1975 and 2011. And you can see that, advanced degrees over the high school graduates, it's a lot more in bachelor's, and this is some college or associate's degrees. Wish they'd split those up, and of course less than high school. And you can see that if you compare these two charts, and you see that so many more people have gotten at least a bachelor's degree or more, and a higher proportion of them have, then it's obvious that this is 30% of the population. So that means that all these people are earning a lot more money. As to the history of government involvement, we start with, for example, the GI Bill after World War II. There weren't any student loans with that, but that was the introduction to mass higher education in the United States. But the story really begins in 1958. The Soviet Union launched Sputnik into space and just terrified the US government. And so Congress passed the National Defense Education Act. And what it did is that the government would lend money directly to college students so long as they studied in defense-related fields like engineering or foreign languages or area studies. 1965, with Lyndon Baines Johnson's Great Society program, Congress passed the Higher Education Act. And what the Higher Education Act did is it created a program where the government would guarantee loans lent by private sector lenders to students, and they were usually low-income students at the time that the act was passed. This is called the Federal Family Education Loan Program. So FFELP, that means guaranteed loans. By 2010, Barack Obama signed the Patient Protection Affordable Care Act, which terminated all new guaranteed loans, terminated any new loans that were, or terminated new guarantees to loans from private sector banks. And from then on, all federal loans are all directly lent out by the federal government. The student loan pie chart as of I guess this month is thanks to the Department of Education. You can see that direct loans, which are directly from the U.S. government, they're more than half of all student loans are owed directly to the government, or loan dollars, I should say. And there's still about a third of the rest are leftover guaranteed loans. And there's still a small chunk of them that are private loans. One thing I should add that's excluded from this is what's referred to as shadow debt. For example, a lot of parents will take out loans against their 401ks, or they'll take home equity lines of credit against their houses, and they'll use those to pay for college. And those obviously don't appear there. So for all we know, the amount of loans that are taken out for higher education in general might be, hundreds of billions of dollars more than what I've stated up here. And trying to increase your credentials. This is the Department of Education's estimate of the number of degrees conferred between about 1969 and 70 and projected to a decade from now in 2021-22. You have bachelor's degrees and then associate's degrees and then master's degrees. And interestingly, and I drew a line on the year 2000, the line for bachelor's degrees just bends upward. And it's pretty obvious that it corresponds with the dot-com bubble busting, and it never really stopped after that. So a big change in people's decisions that they go to college because there weren't any alternatives. This chart is my estimate of higher education cost growth rates. It combines data from the Labor Department and the Education Department. The bottom line here is the average growth rate of inflation, just the deteriorating value of your dollar over time. But the green line is the Labor Department's measure of college costs. And you can see that it's much, much higher than the inflation rate in general. But if you break it apart, it's actually two different things at the same time. The Labor Department is detecting cost increases, the blue line, in public higher education. You can see it's a lot higher than what the Labor Department is measuring. But for the red line, which is private colleges and universities, it is increasing its costs, and it's done so since, I guess, 2007. But it's not the biggest driver of that green line. It is a comparison between median family and median household income over time in constant dollars. And then you have private four-year undergrad and public four-year undergrad tuition costs. And you can see that although we have, public university costs are growing very quickly over time, it's more than triple to less than $9,000 on average. And I don't think that's a weighted average. I think they simply, they just took a number from every single public university, no matter how big their enrollment was, and averaged them together. So I'm guessing this might be a bit higher. But you see this red line, this private universities, it looks like they've more than doubled, nearly tripled their tuition costs, but the actual rate is lower than it is for public four-year colleges. And public universities do price discriminate. They will charge less to poorer students or students from poorer backgrounds. So most of the cost burden has been borne by wealthier families, not by. As of today, at least 40 million Americans have $1.2 trillion in student loan debt. So mathematically, the average is about 25,000 to 30,000, and that's obviously across all age groups, not just graduates.
Yeah, there's some people who take like 30 years to pay it off.
The average has increased by quite a bit, and I think about 1 in 8 has more than $50,000 in debt, and that was a double percentage in 2005. Where were we? Yeah, this is the distribution of student loan debt at the end of 2005, and you can see if you just draw a line straight down that the median student debt would have about $1,000 to $10,000 in student loan debt, but by the end of 2012, the median is somewhere between $10,000 and $25,000, and you can also see that where this, I guess, purpley one, that 6.5% and higher. This is the percentage of people who owe more than $50,000 in debt. And you can
if you look at the numbers, if you care to, that the percentages have, is tripled. The percentage of people who have more than $200,000 in student loan debt has tripled. It's still half of 1%, but obviously those balances are still growing. It is the growth of all non-housing consumer debt between 2004 and third quarter of last year. And what do we have here? At the beginning of the chart, the amount of, this is student loan debt, and this is all other debt, this is credit card debt, and this is auto loans.
Wow.
And over here, you have student loan debt is $260 billion. This is in 2004. It's only about 12% of the total, but by the time it gets out to here, it's obviously over $1 trillion, and this is 36% of all of this debt, more than a third. So the percentage has, the proportion of all non-housing debt there has tripled in the last, 8 years, 9 years or so. You can, the number of federal loan debtors, people who owe federal student loans, has grown by 10 million since 2007. And, as I said at the beginning, you saw that $16 trillion figure in that one infographic. You can see why, they come up with that, it's grown so quickly over time that people would panic over it or project it that far into the future. As to student loan debt among young people, which is, I guess, where the news really is, what the news really discusses. According to the New York Fed, in 2003, the average 25-year-old had $10,000 in student loan debt, but by 2012, that figure had doubled. In 2012, for the first time ever, a higher percentage of 30-year-olds who did not have student loan debt had mortgage debt than 30-year-olds who had student loan debt. This is a map for the New York Fed of the 90-day delinquency rate. Okay, it's not the default rate, it's the delinquency rate. You can see that New York is this kind of orangish number, or an orangish bar between 9 and 11%. And that means that it's got a lower than average delinquency rate on student loans. And what that should tell you is that New Yorkers, they are more likely to have student loan debt, they owe more, but they also have higher incomes, so they're more likely to be able to pay it off. And what this map should also note to you is that whenever you hear about student loan debt delinquency and defaults, it's almost all in the South. And I'm certain it has to do with the fact that that's where the housing bubble is the worst. In fact, barely half of the $1 trillion of federal student loans are currently in active repayment. Out of
But you said half?
barely half of the trillion, they're currently in active repayment. 15% are in school, 20% are in either forbearance or deferment, 10% are in default, and another 5% are in grace period or the 90-day delinquency rate. You have on the top is credit card debt, you have all other debt. Red line, thankfully, coincidentally, is student loans. The yellow line is all mortgage debt. I think this is green. It's auto loans, and these are home equity lines of credit. And you can see that all of these delinquency rates kind of rose up in around 2010 or 2011. They started dropping, credit card debt dropping, all other debt, mortgage delinquencies have really fallen over the last few years, as have auto debt, and I guess home equity loans, credit, HELOCs, they took a little longer. But you can see with student loan debt, it never really dropped. And right now, this is, I guess, from third quarter of last year, it's well over 10%. Here's the uncertain incomes. This is the median earnings by education for 25 to 34-year-olds. And you can see up here that, you're talking about the college premium. Yeah, the people with bachelor's degrees are making more than people with high school degrees. The stratification is very clear. But you can tell that the peak for college graduates was in the year 2000, and then it's just sort of declined to the point where your median college graduate in 2012 made as much as the median college graduate in 1994. And the same, and it's actually worse off for high school graduates.
And these are the ones who are lucky to have jobs, you're saying? Right?
not just jobs, any income. And you were completely correct, because that chart excludes people who have zero earnings.
And so if you, for high school graduates, you know, it was, sure, life was great in year 2000 when less than 15% of people had no earnings, but now it's 25% have zero earnings. And you have, I guess this is some college no degree, which is the same as high school. And associate's degrees are still below 10%, the same is true with bachelor's degrees. Now, yeah, there are always some people between the ages of 25 and 34 who are out of the workforce voluntarily. That's always true, but obviously, you know, this is not by choice. Interest rates will spike in the future, so people will go to school now with a low interest rate, and then in 2 or 3 years, the interest rates will spike upwards, and then your senior year, you have to pay 7% or something like that. So I think there's a ceiling on how high the interest rates can go. I don't think that student loan debt will be $16 trillion by 2030. All I can say is that, you know, I am surprised that student loan debt is kind of ebbed away as an issue in the public mind. It was really prominent around 2011 or so, and it's kind of fallen off the perch. But I think it'll come back as payoffs become increasingly